Every year, billions of dollars vanish. Lives are ruined, families shattered, and it all starts with one text.
Hey, are you picking me up at the airport?
Welcome to Stolen, hosted by former prosecutor Erin West, a relentless voice exposing the brutal truth behind transnational organized crime and one of the most dangerous and underreported crimes in the world, pig butchering scams. These are not random frauds. They're global, organized, and devastating. Victims aren't just losing money, they're losing hope. This is the podcast where the silence breaks. Stolen. And now your host, Erin West.
Hi, friends. Welcome to this episode of Stolen. My name's Erin West, and this is our first episode. I'm so proud of this podcast and the community we've started to create. So make sure you like, subscribe, share this podcast with others. I speak all over the world, and I love running into people who tell me that they are listening to the podcast. I just had a friend post on LinkedIn that she's training for a marathon and that she listened to 5 episodes of Stolen on her practice runs. And it made me happy to know that she's getting educated while she runs and that we are keeping her well enough entertained that she can take us along on her training runs. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for all the feedback. I'm grateful for you tagging me when you talk about Stolen. It makes me very proud. I'm also delighted to tell you that we have 2 new sponsors for the Stolen podcast. We've got BioCatch and Scamdemic, who are in the weeds with me in this scam fighting endeavor. And I'm so pleased that their missions align with mine at Operation Shamrock and at Stolen. And I'm so glad to have them on board. So thank you to my friends at Scamdemic and BioCatch. So as I begin my first episode of this, I thought it would be a good idea to give you a little bit of background about me, because maybe you've come in the middle of this and didn't hear the first episode. So my name's Erin West. I was a prosecutor for 26 and a half years in Santa Clara County. I spent the majority of my career prosecuting sexual assault cases. And that was some of the most really worthwhile time that I spent at the district attorney's office. The last 8 years of my career, I worked with the REACT task force. And that was, we use the word blessing a lot, but it really was an amazing feature of my career that I got to work with the best and the brightest local detectives until I met my other friends too, who are also incredible state and local detectives and prosecutors. But being able to work with the REACT task force for over 8 years was an amazing opportunity to learn from the best. And what it showed me is I came in there as someone who liked to post on Facebook. That was about the extent of my computer knowledge, my high-tech knowledge. And in working with those detectives for the amount of time that I did, I've come out an expert in a lot of different areas that I never expected myself to be. And what that tells you is that there are opportunities in that you don't have to have a computer science degree to become an expert in high-tech crime. All of this is learnable and doable. And in fact, the way I learned most of what I didn't learn from the detectives was every time they said something that I didn't know about, I wrote it down and I watched a lot of YouTube. You can learn anything on YouTube. And so I'm grateful for that time and the education I got with that REACT crew. They're amazing and they are groundbreaking. I look forward to having some of the detectives on the podcast to tell you about some of the amazing work they did in the early days of SIM swapping, the early days of pig butchering. They were pioneers, they were groundbreakers, and they continue to be. But what I saw over the last 3 years of my career really changed my life trajectory. What I saw starting in 2022 were victims reporting to the REACT task force that they had lost all of their money in a pig butchering scam. And it was in early 2022 that was the first time I heard those words, pig butchering scam. I didn't know what that was. And I came to find out that it's a type of crime that is done by Chinese organized criminal syndicates that is a long con. It is a romance scam / investment scam that takes place over months, where a victim is led to believe that they are in the romance of their life. They found their true love. And over that grooming period, that relationship will be the perfect relationship for that person. They will be provided with exactly the type of comfort and attention that they need. And in fact, some of the victims I've talked to have said it was the best relationship that they'd ever been in, and that they understand this was a scam, but they actually really miss that relationship. And to me, that speaks to the level of loneliness and isolation we have in the United States. The reason I'm bringing this all up is today I'm going to talk to you about where we stand on October 1st, 2025, and how I've been in this game since March of 2022. And I have a friend, Alex Zerden, who said to me not long ago, he said, "And you've been working so hard on this for 3.5 years, and have things gotten any better?" And the fact is, no, friends, they've gotten significantly worse. And I think we really need to look at that. And we really need to look at what that means and what needs to be done. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you know that over the past 30 days, I've given you 30 days, 30 ways out of the scamdemic. Once I realized the scope of what this pig butchering phenomenon was about, once I realized that this is Chinese organized criminal syndicates operating out of sophisticated industrial compounds, doing this dirty work on the backs of human trafficked victims, I realized the gravity of what was happening. I realized that we are moving a generation's worth of wealth into the hands of criminal bad actors. I realized that more and more these human trafficked victims are coming from countries that are extremely vulnerable, and that these countries are not the type of countries that can afford to go rescue their citizens once they've been trafficked to Southeast Asia. And that we are at a crossroads of history that will remember this era in terms of a redistribution of global wealth and a redistribution of human beings into parts of the world that they never intended to be in for very long. And this is going to be a big deal change. So when I realized all that, and I realized how important this was, and I realized that I had a voice that was important in getting this heard, I left my job at the district attorney's office. I retired after 26.5 years, and I made this my mission. And that's what Operation Shamrock is about. Operation Shamrock was founded with the principles that we can educate about, we can mobilize against, and we can disrupt transnational organized crime. And when I thought up these pillars back in 2022, I sat at my kitchen table with butcher paper. And anyone who knows me from a long time ago know that all of my best work is done with big colored markers on butcher paper. That's how I operate. That's how I study for the bar. That's how I study for law school exams. That's how I plan vacations. And certainly that's how I'm going to plan a response to the pig butchering crisis. And so I wrote out this plan. And when I think about that plan, I see that all of the pieces of that plan still demand more action. I'll be holding an all Shamrock meeting in a couple of weeks. I'll invite you all to it, and I will show you what Operation Shamrock has been able to do completely unfunded. We've had a generous gift from a single donor that has propelled us through year one. But the fact is, this is what our small team at Operation Shamrock was able to do with no budget. And we've done some amazing work. And I can't wait to show it to you and tell you more about it on our All Shamrock meeting, which I will invite you to. But what I've also seen is that there is a lot more work that needs to be done. And there's a lot more pushing and demanding that I need to do in order to get us there. So, friends, over the past 30 days, I've given you 30 days, 30 ways out of the scamdemic. What I've done is I've condensed that into basically seven pillars I'd like to talk to you about today. So, long intro, but here's where we're going to. today. Today, I told you a little bit about me and why I'm here. Now I'm going to tell you about the 7 ways that we can get ourselves out of the scamdemic. And what I also would love to tell you is that today, the Aspen Institute is dropping their paper, the United Against Fraud, How America Will Defeat Scams. And I hope that the Aspen Institute's paper, along with all of the other interest from so many other parties that care about this movement, will really propel us all into action. I was on a podcast last night, I was on a live radio show last night with Amy Knopfziger of AARP, and she was really optimistic. And she said, what she's seeing is this is a time like never before in the right people showing up in the right way to do the right work. And that's my paraphrase of it. But the fact is, she sees a positive swing. What I definitely can tell you is I see a swing of interest. And what I'd love to see that translated into is a swing of action. Operation Shamrock is action focused. We are in the weeds every day. We don't just talk about it, we do it. And I would love to see more of that. So let me tell you more about my plan for defeating the scamdemic. Number 1, we need to reframe the crisis. Now, the fact is, we can easily push this aside when we see little news stories where you hear about a grandmother who has lost $10,000 or $20,000 in a gift card scam. I think it's easy for people to think that would not happen to me. I don't need to listen to this story. It doesn't apply to me. But this is the story you need to listen to. This is the story that will change your children's way of life and your way of life. We are under attack, and we need to recognize this for what this is. We need to acknowledge that this is a scamdemic, and we need to acknowledge that this is a humanitarian and national security threat. That's what it is. What we have are Chinese organized syndicates working together for the common interest of disrupting the way of life for the rest of the world. They are laser focused on a massive movement of money from all over the world into the hands of bad actors. There is a national security threat inherent in that large of a movement of money out of the hands of civilians, out of the household by household movement of what's happening here into the hands of criminal bad actors. And when we talk about Chinese organized crime syndicates, we're talking about known syndicates. We're talking about triad level business, and we're talking about groups of people who have a history of working together in a collective for a long period of time. So we need to acknowledge what this is. We need to put this at the top of our level as a national security threat, and not just because of the amount of money being moved. What we're also seeing is a change in the way that power is distributed worldwide. What we're seeing is China making inroads in Southeast Asia, in getting access to deep water port in Cambodia, in building an airport that conveniently can also handle military aircraft in Cambodia. We need to be well aware of what is happening. So in reframing this crisis, we also need to look at the humanitarian angle of this. What we have is unprecedented in modern history. What we have is hundreds of thousands of human trafficked victims that are being forced into forced criminality. And we've got a situation where we have victims on either side of this crime. We have people being forced to do it in very violent ways. When you think of how does that work? How do you get a human being to really do this kind of dirty work against a fellow human being? How do you get someone who thinks they're coming to Bangkok to do a data entry job? How do you turn that person into someone who's going to make someone fall in love with them and then steal their money? Well, that's not easy to do, and you know that. And so to do that, they have to use violence. And so that's what's happening in Southeast Asia. It is a humanitarian disaster in that we have a massive number of people being held in slavery and required to do this horrible, inhumane type of work, and they're being physically tortured to get them to do it. We need to reframe this crisis in another way, too, and we need to reframe the way we talk to victims and the way we talk about this. It is absolutely still the case every single time I talk to people, and once the interview's over, and they'll say something to me like, But I mean, really, like they're stupid, right? We can't have that anymore because this isn't happening to stupid people. And this isn't happening to just elderly people. This is happening to your cousin. This is happening to someone in your neighborhood right now. You are 1 degree away from this and you don't realize it. And the reason you don't realize it is because people don't talk about it because there's a stigma. So we need to reframe how we refer to this because these aren't stupid people. On Fridays, I talk to survivors of this crime, and what I hear from them en masse is, Erin, I need you to know that I'm a very smart person. And yes, you are. You have a PhD. You are a president of a bank. You are a lawyer. You're a doctor. That's who this is happening to. And these people are embarrassed to come forward. So we don't know how big the problem is. That's another major piece of this, is that when we reframe this and we start normalizing the fact that people are getting scammed, well, that's when we can really start understanding how big this problem is. So when we reframe the crisis, we've got to reframe who this is happening to and acknowledge that this is happening to people just like you and me. And to reframe the crisis, we need to collect and share accurate data, and that's part of reducing the stigma. Right now, we have a situation where victims are frustrated. They are reporting to people and they're getting no response. When they report to the FBI's IC3, they get no response. When they report to local law enforcement, oftentimes local law enforcement is not ready to take that complaint. They don't know what to do with it. So in order to have data that we can share, we need to stop having victims report to 17 different places, because when they don't get help from the FBI and they don't get help from local law enforcement, they report to the FTC and the SEC and the CFPB and everybody and their brother. And the fact is, they're tired, they're exhausted from reporting, and they don't know what anything is being done with any of this data. And the fact is, the IC3 is not well set up for collecting the kind of data we need in order to solve this crisis. So we need to do better about collecting and sharing this data to define the scope and to track our progress. We need a baseline. We need to know how bad it is on October 1st, 2025, so that we can look at it in March 1st, 2026 and see if we've made any progress. Because I'll tell you what the data shows us right now. No, we have not made any progress, friends. No, it's gotten exponentially worse since I started looking at this. And I'm just taking a moment to take that in. Okay, number 1, reframe the crisis. Number 2, mobilize public awareness. Here's the thing. You guys, if you're my age, you know the Nigerian prince. And you know that that is a scam. And you are not going to send money to a Nigerian prince who is awaiting his riches that have been yet to be released to him. You know that's a scam. We need to make pig butchering the new Nigerian prince. There's no two ways around that. Everybody would like to tell you we can't arrest our way out of it. We can't make people aware our way out of it. We can't sanction our way out of it. Well, what we can't do is point fingers at everybody else to be responsible for this and not use every tool in our arsenal. And one of our biggest tools is awareness. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to talk about this every chance you get. I travel all the time for work, and today I got in an Uber in New York City, and you can bet I talked all about pig butchering. And quite honestly, it's a wake up for most people I tell this story to, and it almost sounds too incredible to be real. I'm telling these people about penal colonies in Cambodia that have thousands of people trapped there that were human trafficked there. It's hard to take in, but that is what is happening. And we need to let people know exactly what is happening so that they too can understand the gravity and why it matters to not respond to these texts, why it matters to tell your mom, tell your sister, tell your grandma, and tell your barista about these crimes. Along with awareness, we need to talk about digital safety. So the first is start talking about it. Number 2, massive awareness campaign. This isn't difficult. There's so many of you that want to be helpful, and I'm so grateful for that. And so what I say is we need to make the media our ally, and they're one of my greatest allies in that they are the ones who are exposing so much of what is happening here. It's the media, and it's our friends at UNODC and our friends at IJM who are really in the weeds. The best way to get this information out there is to talk about it, to have it in the media, to share it on social media. And if you're not ready to be the one sharing this on social media, then just repost what I'm saying. Get the information out there. Share it with your community. So to do that, other things, teach digital safety in schools. That we need to reframe how we are handling our lives in the digital space right now. We need to teach our kids from the outset that we cannot trust anything we are seeing in the media right now. I was outraged over the weekend. I was at a football game at University of Colorado Boulder. They played BYU. The next day, I'm scrolling Facebook and I see a purported piece of news saying that one of the Colorado players was trampled by BYU, trampled and killed. And I thought, I know I left the game early, but I did not hear that. So I started to do a check on it. Sure enough, the name they used is a football player, but he is not a football player at the University of Colorado. He is a football player in the state of Florida. And he was injured at a football game Saturday night, but he is very much not dead. He is very much not a Colorado football player. And meanwhile, there's a picture with his face on it with an RIP and the dates of his birth and death. So that is what is being propagated on social media as news right now. And there were plenty of people, there were dozens and dozens of people responding to this news post on Facebook saying how terrible that is and what a tragedy that is. We can't believe anything we see, period. We cannot believe anything that we see. And we need to no longer trust what we are seeing without verifying it. So any electronic communication that you did not ask for, you need to treat as a scam until you see otherwise. Mobilizing public awareness, we need to fund local journalism and grassroots responders. We've got a situation right now where we do not actually know what's happening inside Cambodia because there are very few local journalists. It's a really difficult place to be a local journalist, and we need to support the journalists who are getting that information out to us. And we need to activate survivors and allies to join the fight. That is how we create awareness, is we get people to tell their stories and we provide a safe place for them to tell their stories. There are real life stories happening every day that would shock you. And to make those stories stop, to make this bad activity stop, we need to start talking about it and preventing the next wave. So 1, reframe the crisis. 2, mobilize public awareness. 3, strengthen law enforcement. Well, you know this is where my heart is, friends, because I came to law enforcement because I have a strong belief in justice and fairness. And what I saw happening was so incredible to me that ultimately I had to leave law enforcement to help fix it. And that is, we were being hit with a crime that had been specially engineered by the enemy in a way that they chose a crime that was very humiliating for victims and made them not want to report it. And they chose a crime that when they did report to law enforcement was unfortunately not well prepared to handle. What is happening is that there is a large movement in the way bad guys are moving money these days. And it's not just fraud, it's how people are moving money for murder for hire, how they're buying weapons, how traffickers are moving money. This is absolutely the way of the future for how bad guys move money, and therefore law enforcement has to be ready to be able to investigate it. And we're not there yet. And to do that, we need help. So let me tell you a little bit about Operation Shamrock and what we did in this way. My team at React, when we saw our first case, we saw that a local victim had lost over $300,000 in cryptocurrency. Let me rephrase that. A local victim had stolen from him $300,000 in cryptocurrency. And it appeared very clear to us at the outset that this money had gone overseas and that the bad guys were overseas. So it had been very standard for local law enforcement to close the door on that case and say there's nothing we can do about it. But one of the pillars of what I believe in is what if we could? And so what if we could track down that cryptocurrency and get it in the hands of the victim from whom it was stolen? And so to do that, we had to wrangle our way through existing California state law that is not set up for the seizure of cryptocurrency, particularly when we don't intend to ever have a suspect before the court. So we made it work with existing law, but that's not the most optimum way to do it. And so we need to revise laws to make it possible for law enforcement to seize cryptocurrency that they can find that belongs to their victim. What we did after we figured out a way to do that is we started looking for others in the nation, and we found that there were pockets of places in the United States that was also doing this impressive work. And we made friends with those law enforcement agencies where that was being done. My OG friends in this business are from Manhattan, are from Queens, are from Connecticut, are from Minnesota, are from St. Louis. And we found that there were other people that were doing great work too. And so we banded together. We called ourselves the Crypto Coalition. There were 85 of us at the start of this in 2022. And today there are more than 2,400 of us. We're local, state, federal, international, and we work together to develop the capacity to do this work. Our Crypto Coalition listserv is active. Number of posts every day of people looking for help, people giving help, about people saying, hey, I've got a victim in Wichita. Can someone go interview? The cooperation within that group is like nothing I've ever seen before. And we teach each other. Right now, we're in the middle of a 2-week series where every day at noon Eastern, we are having an expert. Do a webinar for the group about how to seize this money, how to draft a policy for your agency, our first episode this week was Bitcoin for the Beat Cop. We are here to develop that capacity. And so we need more of this. We need funding for this. We need more of this. And we need to build that capacity in the United States. These are no better. It's a mandatory. We must move forward in this way. And while we're at it, we must proactively go after the crimes that are being committed on U.S. soil. There are plenty of scam activities that are happening within the United States. Part of what happens in these pig butchering schemes is that there's a network of couriers who will literally come to your house and pick up $20,000 in cash. These people are on U.S. soil. They should be arrested. They should be prosecuted. And again, there are great pockets of places in the United States that are doing that work, including my very own React task force that I had the pleasure of working with. And so it can be done. What if we could? Let's keep on doing it. So reframe the crisis, mobilize public awareness, strengthen law enforcement. Number 4, disrupt criminal infrastructure. We have got to stop these scam texts and fake websites at the source. We need to build bridges with telco and with the companies, the registrars that are allowing these fake websites to exist. Now, I know that there are going to be technical reasons why what I want can't happen, but I need to better understand why it can't happen, because quite frankly, I have never seen any methodology of getting information in front of the entire United States in the way that they have. I go to a conference and I ask, hey, has anybody gotten a job offer this week? And everybody in the room raises their hand. Where else have we seen any crime industry able to infiltrate the entire United States and world, quite frankly, in the way that these scammers have? We have never seen anything like this, and we've got to do better about making it stop. We need a fast, action-oriented reporting platform. This was one of my pillars from the outset. What I could see that was very clear to me is if you happen to be a victim in Santa Clara County, we could help you. You would get in front of qualified investigators in a reasonable amount of time that could investigate your crime and let you know what happened to your money. But if you did not live in Santa Clara County or one of the counties where my friends are operating, you would have a difficult time. And what I realized was we need a system where victims can report and get their claims investigated in the smallest amount of time. And to do that, I worked with TRM Labs, and I spoke with their CEO, Esteban Castaño, and I asked him about, is there a way that they could report into your chain abuse platform and that we could get real-time alerts? And so he developed a portal on chain abuse that is a Shamrock portal. So if you go to our website, operationshamrock.org, and you click report a scam on our platform, it will take you into chain abuse. And from there, you are in a special portal where Operation Shamrock's vetted active law enforcement investigators will see your complaint and they will investigate it. And most importantly, they will give you an answer. Now, quite frankly, the likelihood of you recovering any money is slim. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it's very important to me to be a truth teller and someone who sets expectations accurately. And so what you will likely find is that there is no way to recover your money, but you'll have an answer. And that's what's been lacking to date, is that victims were reporting and getting no help locally. They were reporting federally and they were not getting any help. And so we have a nation of disenfranchised victims who are, quite frankly, disappointed and at worst furious that they are regular tax-paying good people, trusting honest people who are reporting a crime and not getting any help. That cannot be our response in the United States. So this triage portal that we set up through Operation Shamrock into chain abuse, you will get an answer. You will get a response and you will find out where your money went and whether or not it's recoverable. We need to figure out how these bad actors are reaching victims and we need to shut it down. And quite frankly, this requires the assistance of social media to make this happen. I don't know how we do it, friends, but we have got to get our social media partners to understand the threat, the consequences, the gravity of this, and work with us to get these profiles off their platforms. I'm going to front it. I love Facebook. When I found out about Facebook at a high school reunion years ago, I thought this is the greatest invention ever, and I can keep up with my friends but I have to tell you that that is not the Facebook of today. What I see on the Facebook of today is I'm being served people I don't know. I'm being served groups I did not sign up for. Inside these groups, they are riddled with scammers. It is a playground for scammers right now, and they're doing it in such a clever way that people are unsuspecting, and they're not realizing that the woman in their group that is asking them to vote on which bridal gown she is going to wear is a scammer, and that all she's trying to do is get you to engage with her so that then she can reach out and try to be your friend and try to teach you about an investment platform. You guys, we have got to come up with how we are going to make this stop. There's just no excuse for allowing these bad actors access to victims in this way. And in disrupting criminal infrastructure, we've got to divide and conquer. Here's the thing. We need to have our highest levels of federal law enforcement taking down kingpins. We need to have Treasury sanctioning. We need to have our State Department acting as diplomats that are really looking out for the best interest in the United States and helping put pressure on countries that are allowing these bad acts to take place. We need every level of government taking their part. Everybody has a tool in their arsenal. Everybody has something that they could be doing here. And so let's get together and agree on who's going to do what and then do it. Our state and local law enforcement, we are best served by having a uniform platform to refer victims to, or at least a uniform methodology of information that we are going to get from victims so that we can feed it up to a national intelligence center that is looking at how we take down these kingpins. There is a role for every level of government, and there is a role for NGOs and victims organizations, and we need to get everybody at the table, and we need to get actual buy-in for what people are willing to do. We can no longer continue to have panels where people talk about we really should have a public-private partnership. We need to do that. Which leads me to number 5, which is forge real partnerships. We need a global coalition committed to action. It is time to figure out who are our doers. Who are the people who are actually willing to get in the weeds with me and the others who are in this fight and say, I can't do everything, but this is what I can do, and I will start today at doing it. And it's got to be global. There are a million people who will tell you why this won't work and why it can't be done. But we don't have a choice. We need to figure out the workarounds that are going to enable us to get this done. And to do that, we've got to put diplomatic pressure on these scam-enabling countries. What we're seeing, goodness, friends, you won't believe this, but I watched a YouTube video by Al Jazeera on the plane on the way home today. And Al Jazeera has put out some of the most amazing 45-minute documentaries on the scam crisis. And their original documentary that I watched back in 2022 about how Cambodia's ruling elite were involved in and benefiting from scam compounds really opened my eyes to what is happening. But this one I saw today was the results of a 3-year investigative report they did, and they followed Chinese organized criminals into Paraguay, where they were building and setting up for the next scam compounds that they'd build in Paraguay. And they said, we're not going to call it KK Park because that would be too obvious, but we're going to call it AI Park. They're not stopping. They are setting up in places where they can buy influence. And we need to, as a globe, come together and expose this and work to ferret it out. Under forging real partnerships, we also need to demand true information sharing from tech, bank, and the government. It seems trite to say that we are siloed and we need to stop siloing, but the fact is that's what's happening. We've got a massive puzzle. We've got a, 2,000-piece puzzle in front of us, and everybody is holding their 20 pieces, and they won't share. And so we can't figure out how to connect everything. I'm here to tell you that it's not difficult. This stuff is connectable. If we all put our pieces on the table, it will be very clear what is happening with these organized crime syndicates and how they are stealing all of our money and how they are harming humans in the trafficking. But operating in silos just isn't going to work anymore. And so we've got to start with baby steps of what can you share today? How can we create a uniform sharing system? What will it take? What will it seriously take for you to do some information sharing? So we've got reframe the crisis, mobilize public awareness, strengthen law enforcement, disrupt criminal infrastructure, forge real partnerships, and 6, reform financial systems. We've got to acknowledge that there are things that are just not working. We need a unified strategy. We need to get fintechs and banks together saying, we get it. They're stealing all our money. They are stealing all our money, and we are not going to allow that to happen anymore. To me, one of the most alarming pieces I heard about was new account creation and how Chinese students were coming into banks with counterfeit passports and opening bank accounts all over. We've got to come up with more uniform ways of figuring out who's who and stopping the ability of criminals from opening multiple bank accounts all over and moving money in that way. We've got to fund data collection and local organizations tracking scams. We've got to come up with a way of tracking these scams that shares information data and stops scammers from going from one fintech to the next bank, to the next cash out opportunity. We've got to look at B and see how that can be reformed into a way to get people to actually share that information. So we've got reframe the crisis, mobilize public awareness, strengthen law enforcement, disrupt criminal infrastructure, forge real partnerships, reform financial systems, and finally, demand accountability. Here's the thing. We are at crisis. We are absolutely at crisis. And I remember changing my PowerPoint to the initial slide talking about crisis because that's where we are. And you know what is even worse is that after reading the study from IJM, International Justice Mission, showing that sextortion is coming out of these compounds, we had long thought that that might be the case, but to see the evidence that they found from overlaying reports to NCMEC with known information about known scam centers, they were able to establish that, in fact, it definitely is coming from those scam compounds. Things are only getting worse. If you didn't care about the fraud and the stolen money, if you didn't care about the national security crisis from China, if you didn't care about the human trafficked workers, perhaps you will care about our young teenage boys that are getting sextorted and that are killing themselves. So we need to put Congress and regulators on notice. I think we're getting there. I'm spending a lot of time talking to people on the Hill, and I know my colleagues are doing the same, and I know that Aspen Institute has done the same. I think that we're getting closer to Congress understanding the massive crisis that we're under, but I still think that people are not understanding exactly how bad it is. And that's why I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to set foot on the ground in Cambodia and in Thailand across the river from these scam compounds, and in the Philippines inside raided scam compounds, because it's really hard to describe how bad it is. It's really hard to describe traveling through Cambodia and seeing the massive growth of this industry out of farmlands, rising block-long buildings that are dormitory structure meant to house victims, to steal money from the rest of the world. And I consistently believe that if the highest levels of government understood the physical infrastructure that has been created to attack the United States, things might be a little different. And so I'll continue to talk, and I will continue to put people on notice of how bad it is. And I've got to bring up the other American countries that are complicit in allowing this to happen. Meta absolutely knows that their platform is being abused at scale and enabling these bad actors to access victims. Starlink is enabling the communications that allows the scammers to access our victims. These are American companies. These are American companies that were standing by the president at his inauguration. We've got to do better. So we've got to put some pressure on Meta, Telco, Starlink, American companies that are participating in the ecosystem that allows scammers to steal a generation's worth of wealth. And we've got to overhaul outdated systems. That the way we've been doing work isn't working anymore. It's time for innovation. It's time for what if we could. It's time for bold change. Bottom line, we don't need another task force. We have existing infrastructure that will allow us to attack this. What we need is a room full of can-do people who recognize the gravity of what is happening and who are committed to making change. That's what we need. So I'm grateful for the Aspen report calling attention to this. I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to talk to you through the sponsorship of BioCatch and Scamdemic. And I've laid out 7 major points that if we put pressure and worked on these pieces, it would go a long way to stopping this scamdemic. It's time to work. So if you believe in this mission, if you believe in what if you could, if you believe that we all deserve better than what we're getting, then I hope you'll consider sponsoring Operation Shamrock. We have existed for nearly a year on our own muscle and sweat, and we are now ready to accept the assistance of those who might be able to help fund even more work, like the work that we are already doing. So this was a different type of episode for Stolen this week. This comes from my heart, and this comes from my mission-driven focus on what has to be done to move us ahead. So thank you for sticking through this long episode. Thank you for the support you've given us to date. I'm glad to be at a place in my career where I have the time and the opportunity to fight for these victims. Thanks for tuning in today. I'd like to thank today's sponsors for Stolen. BioCatch helps prevent financial crime by recognizing patterns in human behavior, collecting data as people interact with digital banking forums. BioCatch's models reveal patterns that distinguish the criminal from the legitimate. Visit BioCatch at BioCatch. Scamdemic is a leader in AI-powered scam detection and prevention, protecting individuals, businesses, and financial institutions. Scamdemic delivers real-time insights, identity verification, and intervention. Restore trust, reduce losses, and safeguard customers. Visit Scamdemic at Scamdemic.
You've just heard the truth. Now, what will you do with it? Subscribe to Stolen and share it with someone you care about, because anyone can be a target. Visit OperationShamrock.org to learn more, get resources, and join the fight. And follow Erin West on LinkedIn. Stolen is real stories, real people, and a crisis we can't afford to ignore.